Stellantis just delivered a crushing blow to Canada's auto industry, and Donald Trump's tariffs are the weapon of choice. The Netherlands-based automaker announced what it's calling its largest investment in U.S. history, a staggering $13 billion commitment that's sending shockwaves through Canadian manufacturing. While Trump celebrates bringing auto jobs home, thousands of Canadian workers are facing an uncertain future as production lines pack up and head south. The scale of this investment is breathtaking. Stellantis plans to pump $13 billion into U.S. manufacturing over the next 4 years, creating more than 5,000 jobs across the American Midwest. But here's the kicker. This isn't just about new investment. It's about taking existing production away from Canada and relocating it to American soil. The Jeep Compass, which has been manufactured at Stellantis's Brampton, Ontario plant, is being moved to Illinois as part of this massive reshoring effort. For Canada, this represents more than just lost jobs for the thousands of affected families.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Prime Minister Mark Carney are meeting this hour at Premier Ford's home with U.S. President Donald Trump and the ongoing trade war expected to be a focal point. As you just heard there, they have opposing views on how to respond in this moment to Donald Trump's tariffs, with Ford saying it's time to retaliate, while Carney says it's time to talk. What are the politics of each? Let's bring in our front bench. This evening, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant is here. He's the CEO of Space Canada now. CTV political analyst and former Conservative Industry Minister James Moore is with us. He's a policy advisor at Edelman now. And former Indy BC Minister Nathan Cullen is here. He's a senior advisor with Strategy Corp at the moment. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you tonight. I appreciate you making the time. Brian, I'll start with you. What the Prime Minister just laid out, that essentially the argument is that there are times to hit back and there are times to keep talking. How long do you think that argument holds water with Canadians? Like the position he has now, that now is the time to talk and not fire back. How long does he have that resonates with Canadians, do you think?
It's a fundamental shift in North American automotive manufacturing that threatens the country's entire industrial base. The ripple effects extend far beyond the assembly plants themselves, impacting suppliers, local businesses, and entire communities built around these manufacturing hubs. Unifor, Canada's largest private sector union representing thousands of auto workers, didn't mince words about what's happening. National President Lana Payne declared that Canadian auto jobs are being sacrificed on the Trump altar, calling on Prime Minister Mark Carney's government to use Canada's leverage to fight for these jobs. The union's frustration reflects a growing sense that Canadian workers are paying the price for America's aggressive trade policies. The timing of this announcement is no coincidence. Trump's aggressive tariff policies have created a new reality for automakers operating in North America. While Canada has been partially protected through existing trade agreements, the uncertainty and financial pressure from tariffs have forced companies like Stellantis to recalculate their entire manufacturing strategy. The company estimates these tariffs could cost them $1.7 billion this year alone, a massive financial hit that's driving their decision to relocate production. Ontario Premier Doug Ford called the announcement painful for workers, expressing his disappointment directly to Stellantis leadership. Ford's frustration reflects a broader Canadian concern about the country's ability to compete in Trump's America First trade environment. The premier met with Carney at his home to discuss the escalating trade war, though the two leaders remain divided on strategy. Ford advocates for retaliation, while Carney continues to favor dialogue. Prime Minister Carney, who recently traveled to Washington to advance trade talks with the new administration, was quick to attribute Stellantis' decision to U.S. tariff policies.
Premier Ford later this afternoon, he's already come out and said he'd like to see you hit back, retaliate against new U.S. tariffs. So what's your message to him this afternoon, and does it include a new package of retaliatory action and trade action against the Trump administration?
Well, Premier Ford and I are both interested in results for, in my case, for workers and families across Canada, of course, in his case, for the province of Ontario. And we're looking to work to those ends as constructively as possible. Right now, with the Americans, we're engaged in deep negotiations, intensive negotiations on several sectors of the Canadian economy: energy, aluminum, and the steel sector. The steel sector is across Canada, but the bulk of the steel sector is right here in Ontario. And we want to make progress In those negotiations, I'll be briefing the Premier on the status of those negotiations. We'll also be discussing the auto sector, the forestry sector, other parts of manufacturing, and what will make the biggest difference, not just to those sectors, but to all of Ontario, all of Canada, which is where we end up with the...
He called the company's move a direct consequence of current U.S. tariffs, while promising his government would continue prioritizing investments to reduce Canada's economic dependence on the United States. The Premier urged Carney to stand up for the 157,000 workers in Ontario's auto sector, highlighting just how many jobs are at stake in this economic chess game.
By Mark Carney's broken promises on trade, he promised to put his elbows up, handle Trump, negotiate a win, and have a deal by July 21st. Still no deal, still no win, still no elbows, and the only thing that's up are American tariffs on Canada since the Prime Minister took office. After his humiliating meeting in the White House last week, the President sensed weakness in Mark Carney and decided to have his Commerce Secretary announce that the auto tariffs would be permanent and to jack up lumber tariffs another 10%.
The pressure is mounting from all sides as Canadian leaders struggle to find an effective response to Trump's aggressive trade stance. But Carney's optimism about potential deals in sectors like aluminum doesn't extend to the automotive industry, where breakthrough agreements appear increasingly unlikely in the current climate.
A few years later, with 3,000 people in Brampton pretty worried.
Yeah, I think it goes to an essential proposition that everybody understands. Governments aren't very good at picking winners in a free economy. And that's the basic problem here. What's happening, of course, is there's a guy named Donald Trump and his sidekick, Howard Lutnick, who've upset the world order on trade. So we've got to start reacting differently. BC, forestry, huge industry, they'll make it through. It's going to be tough, they'll make it through. Quebec, aluminum, huge industry. They'll make it through. The Americans don't have enough aluminum. They'll make it through. I'm with Lisa on this one. Automakers, the automobile manufacturing sector as a whole is so huge to the Canadian economy. If it continues like this, that will have a determining effect on all of the country. And, you know, one plant in one city, 3,000 direct jobs, 3,000 families without a livelihood potentially, but then everything else in a ripple effect, all the indirect jobs. That's one factory, and there are many. So it is a huge concern as they're negotiating right now in the United States. This has to be top of mind, but it wasn't. Lutnick was directly saying, Lisa's right, her quote is right, Lutnick is clear as a bell. They're going after the Canadian automobile industry as a whole. And I think we've got to be lucid about what that means to us. We keep talking about Trump and the effect of this. This is huge. This is the big one. Automobile is the big one. And I think that, yeah, you're right, Vashti. I mean, let's hope that there's something in the budget. But let's hope that there's not something in the budget that goes back to the old game of the government trying to pick who the winners are in a free market. That's been proven to be a huge mistake. Benzie was talking about the plants that are still on tap in Ontario.
The reality is that Trump's administration has been crystal clear about its intention to bring automotive manufacturing back to American soil, regardless of the impact on trading partners. The strategic implications of this shift extend far beyond a single company's investment decisions. University of Toronto industrial relations expert Rafael Gomez warned that Canada needs to prepare for a steady loss of auto assembly jobs in the coming years. Gomez argues that Trump won't relent on tariffs designed to ensure more cars are made in America, painting a picture of continued pressure on Canadian manufacturing. He even suggested that Trump is likely looking forward to the photo opportunity of cutting a ribbon in front of the first new Jeep made in Illinois in years.
And we're not stupid anymore. And that includes with the European Union, that includes with Japan and South Korea. All we want to do is be treated fairly. But the fairly is hundreds of billions and even trillions of dollars coming into the United States. And it's our national security is secure because of tariffs. If we didn't have tariffs, we would have no national security. So it's very important.
The symbolism of American manufacturing revival plays perfectly into Trump's political narrative. But this isn't just about symbolism, it's about fundamentally reshaping North American supply chains. Stellantis' $13 billion investment will increase U.S. vehicle production by 50%, supporting the introduction of 5 new vehicles across plants in Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana. The company is reopening its shuttered Belvidere assembly plant in Illinois with more than $600 million in investment, creating approximately 3,300 new jobs. This facility will produce both the Jeep Cherokee and the Jeep Compass, the latter being the model taken from Canada. The ripple effects of this decision are already being felt across Canada's automotive sector. The Brampton plant, which employs about 3,000 workers, now faces an uncertain future. While Stellantis has promised to share plans for the facility after further discussions with the Canadian government, workers and their families are left wondering about their job security. Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown called the decision deeply disappointing, noting that it represents a step backward from the company's previous commitment to modernize and retool the facility. What makes this situation particularly challenging for Canada is the broader context of Trump's trade policies. Reshoring auto jobs has been a central pillar of Trump's economic strategy, and the president has shown no signs of backing down from this approach. The 25% tariffs on Canadian-made vehicles imported into the U.S. have created a competitive disadvantage that's forcing companies to reconsider their North American manufacturing footprint. For Stellantis, which imported more than 40% of its 1.2 million U.S. vehicle sales from Mexico and Canada last year, these tariffs represent an existential threat to their current business model. The company has little choice but to adapt to this new reality or face massive financial losses. The human cost of this economic restructuring cannot be understated. Thousands of Canadian auto workers who built their careers and communities around these manufacturing jobs now face an uncertain future. The shift of the Jeep Compass production alone affects not just direct employees, but entire supply chain, ins and local economies that depend on automotive manufacturing. These workers represent decades of expertise and investment in Canadian automotive capabilities that are now being transferred south of the border.
I think it's nothing wrong with flattery and all those things if it gets you results. But the coalition the prime minister needs of the premiers and industry supporting his approach, I think is starting to fracture a little bit. I think it's starting to show weakness. It was very unified 5-6 months ago, but it was all on this bet that we could pacify this president, mollify him, and actually get to a trade deal. But then we hear his trade representative saying, forget it on auto, and then more and more tariffs hitting Canadians and Canadian workers.
And how much of that do you think is sort of, I guess, exacerbated or influenced or impacted, Brian, by the fact that we have kind of adopted the framing that the U.S. wanted heading into these kinds of negotiations, which is sector by sector?
Industry analysts suggest that Canada's best strategy moving forward may be to focus on becoming an essential provider of auto parts to serve U.S. assembly plants, rather than competing directly in final vehicle assembly. This represents a fundamental shift in Canada's role within the North American automotive ecosystem, from a major manufacturing hub to a specialized supplier supporting American production. While this might preserve some jobs and economic activity, it represents a significant downgrade in Canada's automotive ambitions. The federal government's response has been notably aggressive, with Industry Minister Melanie Joly warning that Ottawa would consider all options, including legal action, if Stellantis doesn't honor its commitments to Canadian workers and the automotive industry. These commitments came with significant financial incentives from both federal and provincial governments, and Canadian taxpayers have a legitimate expectation that these investments should benefit Canadian workers. Stellantis, for its part, maintains that it remains committed to Canada despite this major shift in investment. The company points to its century-long presence in the country and ongoing investments, including plans to add a third shift at the Windsor Assembly Plant in southwestern Ontario. However, these assurances ring hollow against the backdrop of production being moved to the United States and the uncertainty surrounding the Brampton facility. The broader implications of this shift extend beyond Canada's borders. Other countries with significant automotive manufacturing sectors are watching closely to see how Trump's tariff policies reshape global supply chains. If successful in bringing automotive jobs back to the United States, Trump's approach could serve as a template for other industries and other countries looking to protect their domestic manufacturing base. This could accelerate a broader trend toward economic nationalism and the fragmentation of global supply chains. For Trump, Stellantis' announcement represents a vindication of his tariff strategy. The president can point to concrete evidence that his policies are succeeding in bringing manufacturing jobs back to American soil. The more than 5,000 jobs being created across the Midwest will provide tangible benefits to American workers and communities, reinforcing Trump's narrative about the effectiveness of his America First trade policies. However, the success of this strategy depends on whether the jobs being created in the United States provide sufficient economic benefit to offset the costs of higher tariffs and potential retaliatory measures from trading partners. While American workers benefit from increased employment opportunities, American consumers may face higher prices for vehicles as production costs increase due to tariffs and the need to rebuild domestic supply chains. The automotive industry's response to Trump's tariffs also highlights the complex interdependencies of modern manufacturing. Stellantis's decision to invest $13 billion in U.S. operations isn't just about avoiding tariffs. It's about positioning the company for long-term success in a changing trade environment. This includes not just final assembly, but also critical components like the new four-cylinder GMET 4EVO engine that will be produced in Kokomo, Indiana, ensuring that strategic powertrain manufacturing remains in the United States. Looking ahead, the success or failure of Trump's automotive reshoring efforts will likely influence trade policy for years to come. If companies like Stellantis can successfully rebuild their U.S. manufacturing capabilities while maintaining profitability, it could encourage other automakers to follow suit. However, if the costs prove too high or if retaliatory measures from trading partners create new challenges, the sustainability of this approach may come into question. For Canadian workers and policymakers, this moment represents a critical test of the country's economic resilience and adaptability. The challenge is not just about preserving existing jobs, but about positioning Canada for success in a new economic environment, where traditional assumptions about free trade and integrated supply chains no longer hold. This may require fundamental changes in how Canada approaches industrial policy, workforce development, and international trade relationships. The Stellantis announcement is more than just a business decision. It's a symbol of how Trump's trade policies are reshaping the economic landscape of North America. As production lines move south and Canadian workers face an uncertain future, the full implications of this shift are only beginning to unfold. What's clear is that the era of seamlessly integrated North American automotive manufacturing may be coming to an end, replaced by a new reality where national borders matter more than ever in determining where jobs and investment flow. The question now is whether Canada can adapt quickly enough to this new reality to preserve its place in the North American economy, or whether Trump's tariff strategy will succeed in fundamentally rebalancing economic power in America's favor. For the thousands of Canadian auto workers watching their jobs move south, the answer to that question will determine their economic future and the future of their communities.